This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a great show, a very informative show, a dire show for people to listen to. I've got two guests coming on. Both friends. One is Joel Gilbert. He's a very acclaimed film producer out in Hollywood. He's also a guest host on Alex Jones' InfoWars. And my friend Ty Clevenger, former Justice Department lawyer, probably the only lawyer in the United States who'll take the risks that I will take and go against the establishment. The rest of the lawyers, they just play it safe. They feather their own nest. And that goes for the president's lawyers. And we're also going to talk about matters involving the MeToo movement, things that are going on there. There was a decision in New York this week by a federal judge, an Obama appointee, allowing a case to continue against the president of the United States, and how this whole movement is out of control right now. Apparently, men have no rights anymore. Certainly, there are Harvey Weinsteins, but there are also men who deserve to be able to assert their constitutional rights and not be smeared. But in any event, I want to get to what's been going on this week with regard to Jeff Sessions. And I want people to go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org. freedomwatchusa.org. I want you to sign the petition, not just to have me named special counsel. You know, I've been promoting that over the weeks because, frankly, it goes on and on and on. There's no justice. There's a dual system of justice. But I want you to sign the petition, maybe even more important at this point, to ask Jeff Sessions to resign or to tell the president it's time to fire him. I mean, it's gotten to the point of a crisis. I know because I talked to Sessions going back many, many months right after his confirmation. So he appears to be a nice man. But, you know, nice men do what they're supposed to do. They don't bury their head in the sand. They don't run away from controversy. They don't cover their own backsides to save themselves. So that's not a nice man. And I talked to him on his cell phone right after his confirmation last year as Attorney General. And he promised me that he was going to review the case of Cliven Bundy and his sons. And he never did. And the case, of course, was dismissed ultimately by an unfriendly judge. She had to bail out. She was going down with the ship when we uncovered a lot of prosecutorial misconduct, and a whistleblower came forward that said there were even targets on the heads of the Bundy family, that they were being disparaged by the Bureau of Land Management as subhuman, making fun of their Mormon faith. And Sessions at that point said he was going to do an internal review. We've heard nothing about that. This is a complete sham. And then, of course, there's the illegal mass surveillance that's been going on. We know that President Trump, his associates, and people in and around him have been illegally wiretapped. And I spoke to him about that, too. And he said, look, I can't do anything because it touches on the Russia investigation by Robert Mueller, and I've recused myself. But I'll have Rod Rosenstein, deputy, assigned to that, and he'll be back in touch. Never heard anything. And, in fact, Sessions went ahead and supported the renewal without any modification of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is the act that was violated time in and time out, that unmasked the communications of Americans with individuals overseas. That's what they used to get to General Mike Flynn. That's what they used to get to the president and people around him. And he supported that. It's an outrage. He does nothing about the intelligence community's deep state, which is still being run by that very evil CIA director under Obama, John Brennan, and also another individual named James Clapper, who was the director of national intelligence. His loyalists and their loyalists are still in control of the intelligence communities, and frankly, the people that even Trump put in. Mike Pompeo, who's now going to be Secretary of State, he knew new bounds at the CIA. You know, so this is something which should have been addressed by Sessions. This is the most It's the gravest threat to our republic to have mass surveillance on American citizens, notwithstanding President Trump, notwithstanding judges, notwithstanding Supreme Court justices, notwithstanding people like yours truly, that they've been surveilling. And in fact, I had a lawsuit which I brought, and it just was dismissed. We had gotten 2 preliminary injunctions from Judge Richard Leon on this, but apparently they got to him because we know from our whistleblower client that he was being surveilled too. So obviously he cut and ran. And this is something which is very, very serious, but nothing has happened. And then, of course, we know that Sessions lied to Congress when he said he didn't have any contact with the Russian ambassador. It was a stupid lie. This was during his confirmation hearings. But he's now being investigated, or was being investigated, by Andrew McCabe, who was just, quote, fired by the Justice Department. Well, there's 2 issues with this. This explains why Sessions, and I've said this in the beginning, nobody understands Washington, D.C. as well as I do. I don't believe. Nobody living does. Bob Novak and William Safire, 2 fine investigative journalists in the past, did, but these kids that they bring on Fox News and elsewhere, they don't really understand. And even Hannity doesn't understand. This is something which is endemic to our system. And the reason, and they won't say it, Fox won't say it, the reason that Sessions has been inert, the reason he's put his head in the sand, is because he's been under investigation by McCabe for perjury. He's been under investigation by Robert Mueller for alleged Russian collusion. He's been under investigation for obstruction of justice in firing Comey. Of course, he didn't obstruct justice, and he did nothing wrong with the ambassadors. But this guy is a sissy. He's just not a man in a professional sense, and he's buried his head in the sand. And, of course, we know that he's also punted with regard to the email investigation of Hillary Clinton, her missing emails that were destroyed and that kind of thing. And he's done nothing, and I've asked him to react on this, too, with regard to the leaks coming out of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's grand jury investigation. Those are criminal. And then, he put in place Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, who was an Obama holdover, who's the one who appointed Mueller. And Mueller has been exceeding his authority as special counsel. He's indicted Paul Manafort and Rick Gates and others, which had nothing to do with his original Russian collusion investigation. And Rosenstein and Sessions just sit there and they watch it happen. And last but not least, they refuse to appoint a special counsel. They're keeping all the investigations in-house, which means they'll control them. And I'll tell you what the reason for that is because if they investigate the illegalities that have been going on at the FBI and with the Justice Department itself, with people like Bruce Orr and others who participated in that phony Christopher Steele dossier that led to wiretaps of the Trump team, that led to the special counsel being appointed, if he does that, all kinds of stuff's going to come out of the files of the deep state about both Sessions and Rosenstein. Nobody leads a perfect past. And apparently Sessions is worried about the skeletons in his closet. So it's time for him to go. It's time for him to either resign or be fired. He is a national disgrace. And the American people need to rise up and demand that resignation. And President Trump should man up himself because he isn't somebody that has a lot of cojones. It's time for him to start using them and to fire Sessions and to fire Rosenstein and to get people in there who actually believe in the rule of law, who believe in the Constitution, who aren't afraid, who will do what needs to be done. And this, of course, points to the president's own lawyers as well. Now, this week, the president hired Joe diGenova. Now, Joe, I know him quite well. He is an establishment figure. He's stronger than John Dowd. He's stronger than Jay Sekulow. He's stronger than Ty Cobb. Dowd just quit because he didn't want to be associated with taking strong action. This guy's establishment. He's 77 years old. Frankly, he should be put out to pasture. He's a bit too old to do this. I'm not a spring chicken myself, but I'll tell you something. He's 11 years older than I am. He just doesn't have it anymore. So he quit. And Jay Sekulow, he's good for going on TV, and he's a really fine religious rights lawyer. I like Jay. He's a nice guy. But he's out of his league. He's not a criminal defense lawyer, no matter what he says. Maybe in his early career he did some, but not enough to stand up to what the forces of Robert Mueller and his corrupt staff are. And then you have Ty Cobb. He's a Democrat. He represented John Wong during the Chinagate scandal. He's not loyal to the president, and why they put him in there. He's also over the hill, frankly. So now you got Joe diGenova, Now, Joe, makes a lot of noise, but we'll see what he does. In the past, I haven't been comforted by the way he does things, but we'll see. We'll see what he does, and I hope that he'll do things that are much stronger. And what I recommend is the president strike back. He needs to bring a lawsuit against Mueller. He needs to bring a lawsuit against Comey. He needs to bring a lawsuit against John Brennan, against James Clapper and others for violating his constitutional rights by illegally wiretapping him. And, let's take it to the mat. There's nothing to lose right now because the president, as it currently stands, is going to be politically, at a minimum, assassinated by Mueller and his report. Mueller is getting into the Trump empire. He's looking for anything he can to indict Trump and the people around him. And if he doesn't indict Trump, he'll indict his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, or he'll indict his son, Donald Trump Jr. Poor guy's having marital issues. Probably his wife, is bailing out, not loyal. And these are the kinds of things that, really can destroy people because it's not just the pressures from the outside, but it's the pressures from the inside. Something needs to be done before the president is totally neutralized and neutered, and he needs to take the bull by its horn. And I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign the petition to have Jeff Sessions resign or be fired. That's very important. The guy is a national disgrace. And sign the petition to have me appointed special counsel. We need at least 100,000 signatures to get the attention of the president. We're going to be back shortly with my buddies Gilbert and Clevenger. I want you to hear what they have to say about a lot what's going on in this country today, because I'll tell you something, we're in a nosedive. And the federal judges, they've just been rubber stamping everything that the left wants. There are not enough judges left that are willing to stand up to the tyranny that's been going on in this country. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign the petitions to remove both Sessions and Mueller, and I'll be right back with more Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Dangerous.
You don't hear, use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with my good friends Ty Clevenger, a lawyer, courageous lawyer like myself, former Justice Department lawyer, and also Joel Gilbert, a very accomplished Hollywood producer and guest host of InfoWars with Alex Jones, both my very good friends. I want to turn first to Ty Clevenger because Ty brought bar complaints against Hillary Clinton and her lawyers, David Kendall and company, over the destruction of 33,000 email. He first brought one in the District of Columbia. That was dismissed by somebody there by the name of Elizabeth Herman, who had actually donated money to Obama, a very partisan individual. The D.C. bar is extremely leftist and partisan, as you might imagine. And then he brought one in Maryland, and that was dismissed, and he went to a court in Maryland, a state court, and that was overturned, and it's going forward. So I want Ty, who I've worked with in the past before. I mean, he really is someone who will stick his neck out for the American people. The only other lawyer in this country I know who will do it, other than yours truly. And I want him to tell our listening audience what he's been doing, because it's very important.
Well, thank you, Larry. It was a bit of a long shot. I was actually trying to establish how completely politicized and corrupt state bar prosecutors tend to be. And I've established that in other jurisdictions around the country. And so I thought, well, this would be the perfect case study or test case. And so I filed the grievances, as you mentioned, both in D.C. and in Maryland. D.C. completely covered it up. I took it to the D.C. Court of Appeals. They denied it without explanation. Not surprising. And in Maryland, I filed in the local court in Annapolis, and somewhat to my surprise, the trial judge actually ordered the Maryland bar prosecutor to investigate. And they just hit the fan that somebody dared order them to follow the law. And so the Attorney General of Maryland, representing them, has taken it all the way up to the High Court in Maryland, the Maryland Court of Appeals. And that's where we are right now. We had an oral argument a couple of weeks ago, and we're waiting for a decision.
Well, this points out a real problem here. It's a bigger problem than what you had to go through, is that these bar associations, in my view, that the disciplinary councils, they like to burn the little guy, or they like to burn somebody who politically they disagree with, okay? But those people on their side of the fence, their political side of the fence, walk off scot-free. Am I wrong, Ty?
No, that is totally true, and it's bipartisan. In Texas, we had the case where the attorney, someone is a very far left group, filed a bar grievance against the attorney general there. It went nowhere, and then the attorney general was subsequently indicted for the exact same thing. I refiled that same bar grievance and said, look, if he's been indicted, obviously there's probable cause to believe this happened, and Texas bar just swept the whole thing under the rug. And so I've seen it on both sides of the aisle. If it's a Republican state, they're going to tend to protect their Republican officials. But even there, it's not just people in their own party. If you're a prominent lawyer, in a big firm, if you're a former judge, if you're a DA of either party, they're generally just not going to touch you, even if you destroy 30,000 pieces of evidence, because you're above the law.
Well, and tell us what your complaint is about.
Well, it is about the destruction of evidence primarily. And as it has been widely reported, David Kendall, Cheryl Mills, and then a somewhat lesser-known attorney, Heather Samuelson, systematically destroyed more than 30,000 emails from Hillary Clinton and from Hillary Clinton, even though those emails were covered by subpoenas from private litigants as well as Congress. It doesn't get much worse than that. That is an intentional, willful, systematic obstruction of justice. It's a felony many, many times over. And yet in D.C. and Maryland, both the bar prosecutors just shrugged and said, we're not going to even investigate it.
Yeah, well, they used to call Maryland, they still do, the Socialist Republic of Maryland.
Indeed.
That's why most of the conservatives live in Virginia, although Virginia's not much better these days. Who else would elect Terry McAuliffe as governor? But, this is the world we live in, and we're going to come back and just talk a little bit about this, and then I want you to hear what Joel has to say about what he's been investigating. But same thing with judges. No one will look at judges' misbehavior. You and I, Ty, we got a judge sanctioned years ago, but that was very, very rare. And then they wouldn't tell us what the sanction was. So they covered it up for her, too. This was in Memphis, the home of the firm of John Grisham. It's a long story. We'll do it another show. But we're going to be back shortly with another segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. In the meantime, go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org. Sign our petition asking Attorney General Jeff Sessions to resign and to have me appointed special counsel. We'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
As part and parcel to what Ty's been going through, going to these bar disciplinary councils that are ultra-leftist, that, by and large would rather burn conservatives and libertarians than anybody on the left, is the fact that judges are not held accountable. And how do you complain about a judge? That was years ago why I started Judicial Watch. It meant watching judges. Now I have Freedom Watch. But you can't touch them because, generally speaking, who is it that sits on top of ethics complaints against federal judges? It's other federal judges in the same courthouse. They call them judicial councils. And when you file these complaints, and I filed a number of them, they sit on it for months. They come back. They come up with some kind of BS. It has nothing to do with your complaint. And then they say, well, judges are able to make decisions and we have immunity, get lost. In effect, that's what they say. And then there's no place to go. And if you go to the House Judiciary Committee, which can impeach judges, I think the last one they impeached was Alice E. Hastings for bribery down in Miami. He then ran for Congress and won, and he's still a congressman. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And there's a story out there right now about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because 4 of the justices are subject to impeachment proceedings right now, and the Chief Justice is defending them. And the last time they impeached a judge in Pennsylvania was in the 1800s. I think it was 1816. So this is a problem, and that's why our system of justice has broken down. And we're going to be working on that. We're going to be talking about that in future shows, and hopefully we can get some kind of mechanism in place to review judges' unethical behavior and, if necessary, have them impeached. Anyway, I want to turn right now to my good friend Joel Gilbert. Joel has been tracking Obama, who, of course, is still in his mode of trying to destroy the country. He's in his $8 million mansion. He's not Batman, believe me. He's not Bruce Wayne. But he's got an $8 million mansion in Calorama, Washington. He's funded by George Soros. He's working with Eric Holder, as former Attorney General. He's working with the ACLU. And, Joel, tell us what you know about Obama. Tell us who his real father is.
Okay, well, my film, 2012, it's still selling quite well. Dreams from My Real Father. I chronicled a mountain of evidence that Barack Obama's real father was not the Kenyan student, the Kenyan goat herder that he claims that his dad, and he built his political career on this thing. I'm going to bring people together because my dad's a goat herder from Kenya. Instead, I researched and focused on the guy that Obama wrote about in his own book, Dreams of My Father. He talks about this guy named Frank. Frank Marshall Davis, one of the original black Bolsheviks out of Chicago that was recruited by white communists to try to trick black people to join the Marxist movement in the 30s. And they sent, on orders of the Kremlin, Frank Marshall Davis, Obama's father, to Hawaii to try to start a dock worker strike to take over the island and expel U.S. naval forces from Hawaii because the Soviets considered U.S. naval forces an obstacle to Soviet expansion in Southeast Asia. Davis started the stock worker strike. He then became a writer for the communist newspaper. He went before the House Select Committee on Un-American Activities, pled the fifth, member of the Communist Party, anti-American, anti-Truman, anti-white radical. And all the evidence shows that this guy that raised Obama, by his own admission, was also his biological father. And I showed that Davis radicalized Obama into this anti-white, anti-American worldview. Now, the danger, which I said at the National Press Club in 2012, was that you cannot have an American president with a phony background and his father is a Russian agent. We could easily be blackmailed. So that's why it was very rich yesterday, or the day before. Former CIA Director Brennan said, I think the Russians have something on Trump. It's almost hilarious because they had on Obama that if I could figure out that his father was a Russian agent, they could too. And that tells us why Obama's first term was so pro-Russian. He took office 2009. He canceled the U.S. missile defense system in Eastern Europe. Putin said it was brave. The famous reset, of course, was intended only to transfer technology to Russia, which was never allowed before. Of course, the 20% of all uranium deposits go to a Russian company, Uranium One. And most of all, the biggest Russian objective since World War II was to get America out of the way, no longer leading in the world, so they could fill the vacuum of power in Crimea, in Syria, set up a base in Syria with no intervention by the U.S., Ukraine. America was leading from behind. So Obama was an extremely pro-Russian president, and I think it was because this is the real Russia story. They had on Obama that you're not going to get reelected if you don't do what we say, and that's why it culminated a few months before the 2016 election. Obama says to Medvedev, can you please tell Vladimir I'll be more flexible after the election? He's trying to buy time because Romney was hitting him for his pro-Russia policies. And Medvedev said, I will transmit this to Vladimir. It's like a Cold War spy movie, but it was real. So I think that's the real Russia story. Obama was under their control because they could have outed him as his father being a Russian agent. I mean, can you imagine if Putin's father was an American agent, that the CIA would not use that against him? So I've chronicled this and come up with a tremendous amount of evidence, and America's been had. Obama's a complete fraud. He's a radical Marxist, and he corrupted through this ideology that people don't know much about the U.S. justice system. I mean, a lot of stuff, he says it publicly. He said, we're going to punish our enemies and reward our friends. Well, that was a clear signal that justice would not be blind in an Obama presidency. The ends justified the means, and for Marxists, the violations of the law and the Constitution are simply laughing matters. And from day one, it was unequal application of the law, political bias of the DOJ, obstruction of justice, on and on. And Obama normalized corruption, so much so that we see that state attorney generals of the Democrat side saw that as a clear signal, forget about the law and let your radical politics fly. I'm actually going to be doing some film or research on Eric Schneiderman, for instance, out in New York. Attorney General there has completely politicized New York State, only pursues climate change, agendas, ignores the law, doesn't prosecute Democrats like Corzine and others who break the law. So it's a corruption of the Democrat process. It was intentional, and I think America has been manipulated by Russia, not because of Trump, but because of the fact that Obama hid his background of a father who was a Soviet agent.
Well, and let's bring this forward, okay? And I want to get Ty's thoughts. Obama hasn't left. He's still there, okay? And his deep state is still there. People in the intelligence agencies, people at the Justice Department, 97% of the lawyers at the Justice Department either donated money or voted for Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. That's the deep state. And the deep state is primarily controlled by the left. Maybe there's a few on the right and a few libertarians, but they're surrounded. And that's why Trump is having such a hard time. He's even got some of the deep state in the White House. I mean, this week about his the so-called recommendation that he not congratulate Vladimir Putin. Well, you know what? Regardless of our differences with Russia, Obama congratulated Putin. Andrea Merkel congratulated Putin. This is protocol. And if you don't do it, it's something which, the other side takes note of. There's nothing wrong with that. But yes, you have to be strong in the face of that. But Obama's still there. And he has his people
I'll agree
in
with
place.
that. Look, it is a long-term strategy. Leftists have a long-term strategy. He put in place all these judges, politicized every agency, the FBI, the CIA, such that it almost may not matter if a Republican gets elected one day, because it may just be a blip along the way. And that's why they created, I don't call it the deep state, I call it the police state. The police state, because I'm a filmmaker. I made a film where you oppose the ruling power. That's like in the Soviet Union, they used to kill people for being anti-Soviet if you were against the state. And I can tell you, when I made my film about Obama's real background, IRS opened my tax returns, Federal Election Commission investigated me, I got followed around by the Capitol Police and pulled over in D.C., I got hauled off an airplane and questioned by 4 policemen about my movies, my bank account was hacked and given to a Soros reporter. So I've experienced the police state. This is what happened in Russia. When you oppose the government and their view of the world, they come after you. So I don't think the public really understands.
Ty, what's your take on this?
How close we came. If Hillary was elected, it would have been a permanent police state.
Right. Ty, what's your take on what Joel has to say?
I don't think there is a centrally controlled conspiracy, but what I think we do have is tacit collusion, where there's an implicit understanding of who's the quote-unquote good guy and the bad guy. And I don't think anybody has to send out an order from Central Command to people like Elizabeth Herman or, the State Bar Prosecutor in Maryland, or take your pick. They're on the far left. They know what the agenda is overall, and they act accordingly. So, yeah, I think they've burrowed themselves into every aspect of government and academia. I think it's intrinsic to their nature to behave that way. And over time, this is the result we get.
Yeah, I mean, these people are like cockroaches, It would take a nuclear blast. They'd still survive. It's, you can laugh about it, but it's really tragic because
it is.
And Joel says, well, Republican president. Well, I'll tell you something. Republican president, except for Trump, who cares whether they're Republican or not? There are no Republicans that'll stand up and do anything in this country. They just roll over. We had
it's a case study in the dangers of big government. When government gets this big and that many people can burrow themselves in and follow their own agenda and do whatever they want to do, regardless of what the electorate says, then this is the result you get.
Yeah. And then we're on a downward slide. I mean, you can see this week what happened in Austin, Texas. These young kids who somehow, I mean, it's almost like ISIS, in my opinion. They get corrupted by the internet, by social media. They're out of control. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, you didn't worry about guns in schools or knives in schools or bombs going off. I mean, you couple that with a corrupt government.
East Texas, I remember the guys in high school driving onto our campus in their pickup trucks with deer rifles in the back window, and we never thought twice about it.
Right. You know, this is the world.
Deer hunting before school. It never occurred to any of us that somebody might use it on someone else.
This is the world we live in, and it's scary. And I think the place we have to start is by decorrupting our justice system, because it is corrupt to the core right now, between the Justice Department, federal judges, and Congress that just goes around stuffing money into their pockets and going on Fox News and CNN or MSNBC. We're in a real downward slide.
Well, it's definitely a crisis, Larry, and I think the best way to start is from the top. Trump taking care of business like he said he would, and if we can have you as special counsel, I think we'll have miracles overnight. So I'm encouraging everyone to support Larry Klayman, go to his website, and sign the petition.
Well, I'm of the Groucho Marx school. I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. Okay, but as special counsel, okay, if lightning strikes, and it'll take lightning for that, because they don't want anybody in there that'll actually do the job, you see. And that's why we need 100,000 signatures, is that I would have the full powers of the Justice Department behind me. And Ty, I hope you would join the team if that ever happens. And well, you know, and we could bring grand jury investigations. We could indict people, and we could actually go in front of juries. But you can't do that now with the Justice Department, because you've got this coward by the name of Jeff Sessions, who's now, we find out this week, he was under investigation by McCabe, and we know that's why he's buried his head in the sand. You know,
well, we should have guessed that he would be neutralized, that they'd be trying to neutralize him. He was 35 years, don't forget, in the swamp. It was many years ago that he was an Alabama prosecutor. So I think they intentionally neutralized him, and it's time to start thinking about other people that aren't doing what we asked them to do or should be doing, like Trey Gowdy. Why is he resigning? How come these are not running again? You got to just wonder what they have on some other people that were at the forefront of investigating the DOJ and FBI. It's just a little
well, Gowdy's another case. I've had experience with him. He's two-faced. He wants to go out into private practice now and make a lot of money, so he plays both sides of the fence, and that's what goes on up there. They have a life. They want to make some big bucks. We'll be right back with Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Hang in there, Joel and Ty, for the last segment.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
There was a decision this week, judge, an Obama-appointed judge, big surprise, federal judge in New York City, that allowed a case to go forward, brought by Gloria Allred, of course, and others, on behalf of a woman that claimed that President Trump had defamed her because he denied that he had sexually harassed her. I mean, that's a great one. So she starts the opinion off. Everybody's got to read it. I'm going to put it up on our website, that no one is above the law. Well, okay, no one is above the law. But she obviously let it go forward because this is going to be the equivalent of the Paula Jones case in some respects. And now she's ordered that an answer be filed. And this is the world we live in today. And it goes into another thing. It's the MeToo movement. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is a saint. I'm not saying that he didn't make unwanted advances on people. Certainly Bill Clinton did as well, did a lot worse, frankly. But this whole movement, which started with Harvey Weinstein, who deserves what he gets and a few other people like Kevin Spacey, who did the same thing with guys, it has translated onto a war against men. And you can smear a man, you can say whatever you want, and then you can walk off, no consequence, and then you can sue him when he denies that in fact he did it. So I want to get your take on this, Ty, and then Joel. But I'll tell you something: men have equal rights too under our Constitution, whether it's the First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment, or any amendment. And it's to the point where we're now living in a witch hunt, not just with regard to Russian collusion, but we're with regard to war between the sexes. Under Obama, we had war between the races. That's died off a little bit since he's left, but it's still there. And this country is being pulled apart at the seams. So, Ty, give me your thoughts on this quickly, and then Joel, if you can do the same. But I'll tell you something: I'm just really disgusted by the whole thing.
Well, back to this issue of the New York case, there has been a constitutional argument that I think was glossed over by this particular judge, going all the way back to Thomas Jefferson, about whether the president can be hauled into court at all while he's in office, because there's a strong and reasonable argument that the president has an important job, and if you ever had every Tom, Dick, and Harry able to sue him on any grounds, and all of a sudden he has to stop what he's doing in answer to that lawsuit, that can disrupt the work of the government. So that's not a question that's ever been settled by the Supreme Court. It may need to be settled, because I think it's going to open up the floodgates of litigation on this president, where every enemy he has, and he has many, are going to start trying to use this to hobble him up and take up all of his time.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Of course, it went forward, and she cites Jones v. Clinton in her decision. So it is an issue that's up in the air. The Supreme Court should decide. Of course, Supreme Court being what it is, it's not much better than the lower courts, but we'll see what happens. Joel, what's your view?
Yeah, I think you're right that the erosion of rights of the accused has happened, and I think the MeToo movement is more of America being affected by the corruption and dishonesty of the Clintons, because back in the 90s, when people accused Clinton of rape and other sexual misconduct and assault, the entire U.S. government, including the Attorney General and First Lady, came out and said everybody that is saying anything of any woman who accuses the president is trailer trash, liars. Monica Lewinsky is a nut job looking for attention. So that became the pervasive mentality of the country because of the way Clinton reacted and Hillary reacted to his accusers, and I think that lasted for many years. So a lot of women, thousands, suffered, I think, because of that. They didn't have a chance or too afraid to come forward. And I think the Me Too movement is now the opposite pendulum swing as a reaction to women being thought of as tramps for the last 20 years because of the Clintons. And it's obviously swung too far.
Well, it's more than that. It's more, in my view. We only have about 30 seconds left. I think it's more than that. I do believe in this country and I'm in favor of minorities. I'm kind of like a civil rights lawyer myself, but they've gotten to the point where they have more rights than the majority. And, now you can just smear a man, walk off, no consequence. You can do it in family court. You can do it in this respect, and it's got to stop. We're all equal in this country, no matter what your race, color, creed, or sex. Anyway, thank you guys for coming on. We'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, and we'll have you back.